Trust me, nobody is more disappointed with the direction that this channel has been going lately than I am. It seems like for the past several months, all I've been doing is talking about which Nikon gear I might buy. Now, in fairness, it is a big decision. When you're going to spend thousands of pounds on gear that you're going to rely on and that's going to last you for years and years to come, it is a huge decision, and one that I have been exploiting beautifully here on YouTube. But this is the final decision I need to make. So I've decided I'm going to buy the Nikon Z8, the 24-70 f4 lens, and the 100-400. But there is room in my bag for a super wide, because I've had the opportunity to use a couple of lenses, both 14mm, one 14-24, one 14-30. So both of these lenses have been loaned to me recently. A chap called Dave was kind enough to send me his 14-24 f2.8, which came with me to Svalbard and performed beautifully, but I do have issues with this lens. And then about 4, 5, 6 weeks ago now, I was fortunate enough to bump into 𝘧𝘧𝘪𝘭𝘪𝘢𝘬𝘴 up in the Yorkshire Dales, and he loaned me his 14-30 f4 lens to shoot this beautiful tree in the Yorkshire Dales. If you haven't seen that video, I'll link to it below. Interesting fact, 𝘧𝘧𝘪𝘭𝘪𝘢𝘬𝘴 is a blind photographer, but if you look at his Instagram profile, which I will link to, you will question, how is this guy blind? Because his photography is fantastic. Anyway, he loaned me this whilst we were out shooting, but then he was kind enough to send it to me again for a proper comparison with this. Basically, I'll level with you. What I want to know is if this 14-30mm lens at f11 is as good or close to this lens at f11, because I've got some notes here. The f2.8, which is this mammoth, this monster lens, 780 grams, which in of itself isn't too heavy, it feels light, but look at the size of it. Look at the size compared to this lens here. It's absolutely huge, and it costs £2,319. Very expensive, but you are going to get exceptional quality. You really are. This one, on the other hand, 14-30, so you get a bit more reach. It's 525 grams. And it's funny because when I made the decision about purchasing the Z8 over the Z7 II, one of the negatives was, well, it's 200 grams heavier than the Z7 II. So I need to save 200 grams somewhere. Could it be here? That's definitely a valid point. The price, £1,169. It's 200 odd grams lighter, and it's significantly smaller. Well, I'm completely torn. You see, when I was planning to make this video with the two lenses, I told myself that although we are testing two lenses, I'm not going to let that get in the way of enjoying some beautiful landscape photography. So I've come to this location, it's fantastic, the conditions are exactly what I was hoping for, but there was one thing that I failed to bear in mind, or one thing that I overlooked, and that was the direction of the sun relative to what I'm shooting, which is Dunstanburgh Castle there in the background. It's beautiful, it's such a great wide angle location. Oh, but I didn't take into consideration my shadow. And with a wide angle lens and the sun behind you and a rocky bouldery foreground such as we have here, it's basically unshootable. Well, that was definitely a mistake on my part, and something to bear in mind when shooting wide angle photography. So after wandering around and killing a couple of hours, I returned back to the boulders to catch the very last of the light. Alright, so we have come over to the boulders, back to the boulders, where we can conduct a proper test. We have a nice composition that's going to utilize that 14mm, and I'll probably do some a slightly narrower field of view as well. And with a bit of luck, I can sort of get my own shadow out of the way. All right, let's have a look. All right, first schoolboy error is the tripod legs are in shot. When using a super wide lens, be mindful of those tripod legs. So one of the things with using a wide angle lens is when you're so close to your foreground, even 1 inch of movement affects the entire composition. What I'm finding is with shooting at 14mm, man, you've got to be incredibly precise with exactly where you place your camera. So this shot that I'm taking right now is the main thing that I'm interested in. I've got a foreground object that's about 2.5 feet from the lens. I've got a castle sitting at infinity, and I'm gonna see if at f11, how sharp can we get everything. Now I'm focusing on the castle. I'm being very careful to focus on the castle. I'm using autofocus, and I'm going in, magnifying all the way in, and just making sure that it's pin sharp. I've got a 5-second timer, and I'm gonna move out of the way so my shadow's not in shot. I'm at f11, and we're gonna see if, focused at infinity, do we have that sufficient depth of field, and is everything nice and sharp and high quality. That's what I'm hoping for with this lens, this 14 to 30. All right, here we go, 5 seconds. Let me move out of the way. Oh, come down here. Okay, I'm not entirely convinced that I got my shadow out of shot, but it doesn't really matter. Now I'm gonna take the exact same shot using, oh, Big Bertha. All the settings are the same, composition the same, about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes between shots, 5-second timer, ducking for the shadow, and there we go. 2 images, ISO 64, f11, focus to infinity. Whew, let's see if there is a difference, a noticeable difference between the two. So whilst making this comparison video, honestly, I was losing the will to live. However, you should know that I took another 14mm vertical shot where I focused in the middle of the scene, and then I took this horizontal at 24mm. All right, that's about as much testing as I can stomach. I'll be honest with you, I don't like making these videos. I really do not like making these videos. However, it's such a big decision that I think it's worth doing, and I think people might find this interesting. So we'll see, but yeah, we'll go back to the office, we'll look at the results, and then I am done with comparison videos. I say that, no, never say never, right? But, oh man, I just can't wait till we're just back on the road and doing some proper adventures, which won't be too long. Big trip coming. But yeah, you'll learn more about that in a few weeks, right? Back to the office. All right, I hope you enjoyed that little outing in the field. We got beautiful light at the end, and I was really happy with the photographs. It's a shame that I was too busy concentrating on testing these two lenses to really enjoy it and make the most of it. But this is an important decision. So I've made some notes here. We're going to cut right to the chase. I asked myself one question, basically. One question. Is astrophotography a big part of my life? If the answer is yes, then I will buy the f2.8 because this is a beautiful lens, excellent image quality, and for astro, this would be outstanding. 14mm f2.8, Aurora Borealis, Milky Way shots, you name it. This is going to do the job beautifully. But astrophotography is not a big part of my life. In fact, I would go as far as to say I dislike astrophotography. And that's because I love evening photography, blue hour photography, sunrise photography. When I go on a trip, I want to see every single sunrise and every single sunset. And whilst doing that, there is no possible way that you can include astrophotography in the mix and still be alive at the end of any trip. So people always ask me, why don't you shoot more astro? It's because I would much rather get a good night's sleep so I can be excited for what the morning brings. So for me, astro is not a big part of my life. Which brings me on to this, the 14 to 30mm. I don't see why I would buy this over this. Now the image quality of the 14 to 24 is excellent. It's absolutely top notch, and you can see from the images here when we zoom in, we've got crisp sharpness, beautiful contrast, fantastic color. But the image quality from the 14 to 30, which is half the price and 200 odd grams lighter, it's very, very close. I knew that they weren't going to match perfectly because, you know, it's twice the price, twice the size, it's huge. There's going to be a difference, but I didn't think the difference was that big. So I made three notes here, basically. Sharpness, very close. Bear in mind this is at f11, focus on different points. The depth of field was very similar and the sharpness between the two lenses was very close. Now the biggest thing that I noticed between these two lenses was the contrast. When you look at the 14 to 24, the contrast is outstanding. It's crisp, it's clear, and you can see clear definition in the deep shadows and that sort of grey area. And when you compare that side by side to the 14 to 30, they're not as crispy. And it's not sharpness, but it's contrast. And I noticed that more than anything between the two lenses was that lack of contrast. Now, looking at the image by itself, the 14 to 30, you're not going to look at an image by this lens and go, "Ooh, that looks a bit flat and a bit mushy." No, it's fine. It's excellent. The difference is noticeable side by side when pixel peeping at 100%, but other than that, it's not immediately noticeable. I looked at the edges of my images and didn't see a huge difference between the two lenses in terms of edge softness. And then I've got written down issues, and really the issues are only with this lens here, the 2.8, and the main issues, well, the main one for me is the size. It's not a very heavy lens, but it is a big, wide, chunky lens. And of course the price, but even the price I suppose isn't that much of an issue because the quality is there, the quality is fantastic. But the price becomes an issue when you look at the price of this lens, which is effectively half. Now actually for me as a landscape photographer, the main issue with buying this lens and having it in my bag is filters. Because this has such a large element on the front, I'd have to buy a completely separate filter kit for this lens, which means if I'm out and about shooting long, shooting medium, and then I want to shoot something super wide, in my bag I'd have to carry around a separate filter holder and a separate polarizer. For example, with this lens here, the 14-30, I can use my case filters. They're small, they're lightweight, they're very handy. I'll just break one out here. Polarizer, although I'd be careful polarizing at 14mm, but nonetheless, polarizer on, done. There is a tiny bit of vignetting, but you can get away with it. Unfortunately, what you can't do is stack. If you stack, then you can't do it. Too much vignetting, then you have to drop down to about 17mm. But it's really not too serious, and I think that's something that I could live with. And I think it's better than this having to get a separate filter holder, which, hang on, let me demonstrate here. If I want to use a polarizer on this 14 to 24, I need to have the lens hood on, and then this polarizer actually screws onto the lens hood. There's my polarizer on. So I believe then, I'm not too familiar with this system, haven't actually used it in the field, I've just been playing around in my office. And then if you want to use square graduated filters, then this is a specially made filter holder for this lens, which goes on like so, and then you can drop filters in there. I'm not sure if you can use this massive polarizer with other filters, so it might be the same, that just with this lens you can't stack, but using filters in a super wide is always going to be a tricky business no matter what you do. But for me that was actually a massive factor, is my workflow. Having that lens, it's actually going to disrupt my workflow, which isn't, I don't think, worth it. Now if I go and shoot astrophotography in the field, a special event, maybe Aurora Borealis or something like this, I would simply hire this lens and I would use it only for nighttime photography. If you're doing daytime, evening, morning landscape photography on a tripod, f8, f9, f11, this is going to suffice. The quality of this is outstanding. It's excellent. Of course, it's not as good as this, but again, we're talking pixel peeping, minute differences side by side. It's not huge. This is a great, small, lightweight, compact, which is the same as small, versatile lens. A fantastic kit to any landscape photographer's bag. I hope you enjoyed this week's video. On my website, I have 2 books available for purchase, and I'll leave links in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all hopefully next week.